Now, turning to the next item on tonight's agenda, it's the launch of the National Farmed Animal Health Biosecurity, the National Farmed Animal Biosecurity Strategy. And Joe O'Flaherty is a vet in our department who was centrally involved in drafting the biosecurity strategy. I know that a lot of hard work went into it, and Joe will give us some details on the biosecurity strategy after a little while. But just before that, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Mr. Charlie McConalogue, very kindly took some time out earlier, out of a very, very hectic schedule, I might add, to give us some thoughts on the launch of the new biosecurity strategy. We'll hear what the Minister has to say about the launch in just a few moments, and then after we've heard from the Minister, Joe O'Flaherty will take it from there. So now, Brian, if you can get us that video, we'll move on to that item. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really pleased to be able to speak with you all here this evening, albeit virtually. It's a real honour to be able to launch my department's first National Farmed Animal Biosecurity Strategy during Animal Health Awareness Week. This is a really critical moment in the control of disease in animals and biosecurity. Good animal health is a matter of vital interest to each and every farmer, as well as being of strategic imperative for our industry. Maintaining a high standard of biosecurity on our livestock farms is key to protecting the health status of the individual farm and of our national herds and flocks as a whole. This strategy has been developed following significant consultation, and I'm very pleased to recognise the input of all stakeholders. In particular, I understand that the Stakeholder Forum, which took place at the end of 2019, saw a very high quality of contributions and great engagement by all of those who took part. When it comes to biosecurity, the old adage of the prevention is better than the cure is indeed very true. The National Farmed Animal Biosecurity Strategy is underpinned by this approach and emphasises the importance of disease prevention for animal health, animal welfare and for public health. Protecting public health from foodborne zoonosis and from the challenges posed by antimicrobial and antiparasitic resistance is most effectively done by taking a holistic approach that incorporates control at farm level. Taking a one health, one welfare approach to food production provides a framework to ensure that our systems are sustainable in the broadest sense, environmentally, economically and socially. This strategy supports commitments contained in the Programme for Government on improving animal health by using a One Health approach. The Programme for Government also specifically mentions biosecurity as an area for support and for improvement in the intensive pig and poultry sectors. I'm pleased to note in this regard that my department is currently supporting a number of industry initiatives in the intensive production sector, including those led by the Campylobacter stakeholder group, the Pig Industry Stakeholder Group and the Animal Health Ireland Pig Health Check Programme. Biosecurity is not a new concept for the livestock sector. We are not reinventing the wheel here. This strategy instead proposes a set of strategic actions which will assist stakeholders in building on the good practice that is already evident in a number of the livestock production sectors. The word practice is mentioned many times throughout this strategy, and for me it is worth noting. As with any skill, practice makes perfect. Our livestock sector needs to become biosecurity fit, so to speak. Practicing good biosecurity each and every day is essential to ensure that all stakeholders are playing their part in protecting the health and welfare of the national herd and flock, one of our greatest assets, to the best of our ability. If fully implemented, the 6 strategic actions set out in this document will provide benefits for animal health, animal welfare, public health, the environment, the economy and society as a whole. These strategic actions include the development of national standards of biosecurity by establishing codes of practice for and by each sector, including farm service providers, marts and agricultural show organisers. In order to ensure the information on biosecurity is available to all stakeholders in an accessible and easy to use format, a further strategic action is the establishment of a central biosecurity hub on my department's website. This will provide a central resource which will include sector-specific biosecurity codes of practice and toolkits to assist stakeholders with the implementation of these standards. Links to the excellent resources provided by other organisations such as Animal Health Ireland, Chugask, and other research organisations and state bodies will also be provided. In relation to future research needs, this strategy proposes the establishment of a collaborative working group with both the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine and stakeholder representatives. Working together, they will help identify data and knowledge gaps in the area of biosecurity, which constrain the adoption of good biosecurity practices. The outputs of this group will be taken into account in shaping future research calls funded by my department. Existing national and EU legislation such as the Animal Health and Welfare Act and the EU Animal Health Law, as well as forthcoming legislation such as the CAP Strategic Plan regulation, can all be used to encourage the adoption of high standards of biosecurity. My department will examine these various mechanisms with a view to ensuring that an appropriate legal framework is in place to support the delivery of this strategy. Those of us working in the agriculture sector are already well aware of the need to coordinate animal health measures with the authorities in Northern Ireland in order to achieve effective eradication and control on an all-island basis. In this regard, I'm pleased to say that the alignment of biosecurity strategies, north and south, is another of the actions outlined in the strategy being published today. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all stakeholders and my officials for their input and assistance in the development of this strategy, which sets out a clear path for raising farm biosecurity standards in Ireland. It is only by working together in a genuine partnership between all stakeholders that we can ensure that the vision for an effective approach to biosecurity in the farmed animal sector outlined in this document becomes a reality for all of us. Enjoy the rest of the webinar. The talks on the programme for this evening are both very relevant and very timely. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Michael, maybe you can confirm that you can hear me.
Yeah, can hear you there, Joe, loud and clear.
Okay, and I'm just going to show my screen. Maybe you can just confirm also that you're seeing my screen. Just put it on. Okay, thanks very much, Michael. And you're all very welcome. See, we have over 150 people on the line at the moment, so a really good indication of interest in this topic. So we'll keep things moving along, and hopefully we'll have plenty to keep you engaged over the course of the next hour or so. I just first of all like to thank the Minister and the Secretary General for their support and the impetus which they put behind both the Animal Health Awareness Week and then specifically the National Farmed Animal Biosecurity Strategy. And I'm here to talk really specifically around the biosecurity strategy. First thing to say is that there has been a huge level of input from our stakeholders into the strategy, and I think that has made it a meaningful document. And it really is only with the help of stakeholders that we can turn it from a document into a reality. So we in the department are looking forward very much to working with stakeholders to make this document a reality. I'd also specifically like to thank two of my colleagues who are, I'm sure, are on the line. They're not presenting this, but they equally could be presenting this. So that's Bernie Doyle and Tara Keogh, who did much of the heavy lifting in terms of taking this from a concept through the stakeholder consultation and turning it into a reality. And particularly Bernie Doyle over the last number of months has worked through the various drafts of the strategy. So just moving into the detail then, this, as I said, I mentioned already that there's considerable amount of consultation with stakeholders has gone into this. Towards the end of 2019, we began by consulting internally with our own stakeholders within the department, and we had multiple divisions contributing to that process. And we came up with an internal gap analysis where we identified areas where we were doing well and other areas where we needed to do somewhat better. From there, in September 2019, we held a survey at the National Ploughing Championships, and that was quite informative. That gave us, I suppose, the views of farmers, directly, and some of those views have found their way into this strategy in one shape or another. In November of 19, we held a stakeholder forum, and we brought together all of the stakeholder representatives in a meeting room in Agriculture House, and we thrashed these issues out for an afternoon, and I think it was a really productive session, as the Minister has mentioned. And again, these views have been very fundamental to shaping the strategy. And then very recently, we put the draft strategy out for review, and we have taken on board any final suggestions that have come forth from that. The strategy is to be published on our website tomorrow. So for those of you who are interested, you can go on to the DAFN website tomorrow and you can see the strategy in detail. It's not very long. One of the guiding principles that we had was that we would keep it short, no more than 20 pages, and I think we have achieved that. But hopefully what you see in the strategy is meaningful and real. Okay, so just in terms of some of the drivers, why produce a National Farmed Animal Biosecurity Strategy, and why do it at this time? First of all, to say that there is this set of overarching principles, a concept, one health, one welfare. And really what that is the concept that the health of ourselves, the human population, the animal population, and our environment, that the three are interlinked, and any changes in the health status of any of the three impact the other. So that's a guiding principle. It informs the National Farmed Animal Health Strategy and also has informed our biosecurity strategy. In terms of legislation then, the Animal Health Law, this EU regulation which came into force recently, I suppose creates a new dynamic around biosecurity. It recognises in the first instance that biosecurity is a key prevention tool at the disposal of farmers and other operators. It creates responsibilities on the part of farmers and operators for the health of animals and for the biosecurity of their holdings. And it also requires that farmers and other professionals in the sector have an appropriate degree of knowledge in relation to biosecurity and other areas of animal and public health. So I think it's a regulation which changes the dynamic and puts great focus. Really is all about shifting the focus of our efforts from prevention to cure. And we tried to change the focus, or we have been trying to change the focus from one of managing events that have already occurred to actually preventing them occurring in the first instance. And specifically then within the National Farmed Animal Health Strategy, there is reference to biosecurity protocols, and really the launch of the biosecurity strategy this evening is giving effect to the aspirations in that previous strategy. So some of the key points which I'll just go through with you in the next couple of slides that have come out of the strategy are reflected in the strategy, and again drawing very much on the stakeholder feedback. First of all, there's a recognition that none of this can become a reality except if we have real behaviour change at farm level. And I know from my previous roles that behaviour change at a widespread level is not an easy thing to achieve. It requires a lot of people working together, policies working hard in order to get where we want to with this strategy. That is what we're going to have to arrive at. The theory of biosecurity is quite well understood, but putting into practice is a challenge. Like many issues to do with animal health, is about doing the right thing, not just some of the time, but all of the time. And that is part of the behaviour change challenge. The Minister or the Secretary General mentioned the codes of practice. We do intend to promote the introduction of codes of practice by farmers, farm service providers, for introduction into their particular sectors. And we will see these as being documents that can be modified to reflect the specific risk that might be faced from time to time by the sector. We can think of risks like African swine fever or avian influenza, for example. There will be times when the risk will be high, there will be times when the risk will be lower, and the codes of practice need to reflect these changing levels of risk. These codes of practice can then be reflected, and we would see them as being reflected in the specific biosecurity standards that are developed by farmers and service providers across the sector. We also propose that there would be a degree of independent measurement in terms of how well biosecurity would be implemented at farm level. And we have developed some tools in that regard. I'll mention them towards the end of the presentation, so I won't go into them just at this moment. Finally, then, in relation to some of the key points within the strategy, the Minister has mentioned it, the Secretary General mentioned it, legislative tools. There are tools in the tool bag that will help us and help our stakeholders to implement good biosecurity practices. And we want to see this very much as a partnership approach, where this is providing the tools to assist stakeholders to do the right thing. The all-island approach was mentioned. I'll say something about that again in my closing slide. Just as all very aware, as an island nation, it's so critical that we work across the border in Northern Ireland and in Ireland on these issues that affect both of us greatly. I mentioned working in partnership. I'll emphasize that perhaps as I close up this presentation. And then finally, just to say that the governance and oversight, which is so important to the delivery of any strategy, would be provided by an existing body, which is the review body of the National Farmed Animal Health Strategy. So I think it's important that we've set out a pathway to ensure delivery of this document. The strategic actions then that are outlined, I won't go into them in detail. They will be available to you in the strategy document, which will be published tomorrow. Just very quickly to say that we propose the creation of an online central information hub for key biosecurity information. The codes of practice and their publication, I've mentioned that already. And the Minister mentioned this issue in relation to knowledge gaps and also data gaps. Sometimes what's preventing us from moving forward is not so much a gap in knowledge as just a gap in joining the dots between various sets collectively between us. And that will be addressed, and indeed, if there are opportunities to fill those gaps through DAFM research calls, then we will certainly look at that. The adoption of existing legislation and new legislation, for example, the CAP strategic plan, which is coming down the road very quickly. We will look at all of the legislative tools available to us to assist stakeholders to make this plan a reality. I've mentioned the collaboration with Northern Ireland. I don't need to labour that point. And I've mentioned the governance structure, which will ensure the implementation of the strategy. How would we know if this strategy was successful or otherwise? Well, there is a series of desired impacts which are set out in the document. And if we achieve some of these in full or in part, I think we can say that the biosecurity strategy is doing what we hope it will do. First of all, we would hope that there will be a reduction in the prevalence of endemic disease. Naturally, this is only one element in the challenge that is reducing the prevalence of endemic disease in Ireland. And other speakers tonight, Carla Gomez from Animal Health Ireland, for example, can perhaps speak more about those challenges that are involved in terms of reducing the prevalence of some of these diseases. We can think of great progress that has been made in the likes of BVD eradication or reducing the level of somatic cells in our dairy herd. But none of these are easily achieved, and they do require a great degree of collaboration. If the strategy is successful, we will find that we are better protected than we are currently against exotic disease. We see a general uplifting in the health and also the welfare, importantly, of the national herd, because health and welfare are two sides of the same coin. We would hope there'd be improved use of information in relation to biosecurity, better collection and dissemination, and that stakeholders have ready access to the kind of information that they need at any point in time. We would also hope that the level of anthelmintics and antimicrobials that we're using would reduce, and also along with that, that the level of resistance that we're seeing to both these kinds of products will decrease over time. Biosecurity is intimately linked to animal health, and that in turn is intimately linked to human health. That is, in essence, the one health, one welfare concept. And there's very good research from Chagas, for example, to show that the biosecurity standards on pig holdings are quite clearly related to the prevalence of diseases like Salmonella. So there is a clear linkage to food safety. We would also hope to see improvements in farm productivity and efficiency. And certainly I'm aware of some very good cost-benefit analysis that link better health to better productivity and ultimately better profitability at farm level. There should be a contribution as well to the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Again, some very good work done by Teagasc in its marginal abatement cost curve model has linked animal health measures to our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the strategy at a high level should contribute to improved public health. It should contribute to better environmental health. And then last and by no means least, there should be a clear contribution to our efforts to expand our international markets. And we heard the Secretary General talking about the importance of the international markets and the importance of animal health to achieving those international markets, which are so important to us in this country. So I'm just finishing up with these last couple of slides to say that this strategy is not a castle built on sand, that in fact we have a very good basis for what we're talking about in the strategy, because some of this is already in operation. So for example, there's a program called the Targeted Advisory Service on Animal Health. We call it TASA for short. It's a measure under the current Rural Development Programme. And what it does is it allows a quantitative validated scoring system which can validate the extent to which individual holdings are applying the appropriate biosecurity measures. Now that's a measure which is delivered by trained vets, and it's administered on behalf of the department by Animal Health Ireland. In the little thumbnail there you can see one of the outputs from the biocheck review, which shows the kind of detailed information, and in fact it gets a lot more detail than what you can see on the screen there. But that information will then be relayed back to farmers, back to their vets, to allow them to improve their practices at farm level. I'd really like to, just as I'm coming to a close here, really like to acknowledge the really strong efforts by stakeholders in the poultry sector and in the pig sector, both of whom have taken on board this challenge of improving our biosecurity status and really run with it. So the Campylobacter stakeholder group, for example, and you can see the thumbnail there on the slide, has developed a national biosecurity plan, and that's a standard which was agreed for the broiler sector. More recently, the Irish Egg Association has come up with its own biosecurity initiative, and I have a feeling that these two initiatives over time will combine, and that they're going to be a really good example of the sector coming together to underpin its own standards of biosecurity and ultimately its own animal health and welfare standards. To date, 187 biocheck assessments have been completed in the poultry sector, and I think that's, given that we had to stop these assessments for a while due to avian influenza and due to COVID-19, I think that's a very good achievement in the course of this year. I don't want to forget the pig sector. The pig sector has taken some great strides forward as well, and recently has agreed to the introduction into the Board B Quality Assurance standard of mandatory annual biocheck biosecurity reviews on all of the pig herds that participate in the National Salmonella Control Programme. And I really want to congratulate our colleagues, including Shane McAuliffe, who's on the call tonight, on one of the speakers, for the IFA's very proactive stance in this regard. And then finally, just to say that to date, 208 biocheck assessments have been completed out of the 350 pig herds in the Salmonella Control Programme. So my very last slide then is just to say that biosecurity has never been more important. We're all aware that there has been an outbreak of H5N8, high pathogenic avian influenza, in County Limerick. Earlier this year, we had an outbreak of low pathogenic avian influenza, which was quite devastating in County Monaghan and in Northern Ireland. We're all aware of the threat posed by African swine fever. I think Ireland as an island is in a fairly fortunate situation that we have stayed clear of this ravaging disease up until now. And it really is only by dint of really good control of our external border biosecurity, but also the biosecurity of each and every pig holding on the country, and I include hobbyists and small pigs as well as the commercial pigs, that we can keep this disease off the island of Ireland. And then finally, I suppose I don't need to remind anybody on the webinar tonight of the impact that another highly infectious viral disease has had on our country. And I think all of the principles that we've seen in terms of the control of the human disease, we're very much aware of those, and we work with them on a daily basis here in the department and with many of the stakeholders. And I think it really brings home to us the need for a coordinated, all-island approach to some of the diseases that we have been talking about this evening. So I don't want to keep anybody any longer. I would like to hand back to Michael just to say I'm looking forward to the Q&A session at the end and happy to engage with any questions that might come my way. So thank you all.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. I'll probably appear back on the screen now in a minute, hopefully. So thanks to you, Joe, and indeed thanks to the Minister for his thoughts. And from our perspective, it's great to see how our aspiration in terms of animal health is shared by those at the very highest level of government. And I think it's clear now that there is a very well thought out vision for where we would like to go in terms of biosecurity in this country. And I think it's also very clear that from what Joe said, that where we want achieving that vision really depends on us continuing to work in partnership, as we have done on initiatives like that National Biosecurity Strategy and on the Animal Health Awareness Week this week.